Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DABCC TV. I'm quite excited about this episode, as this is an episode that's a year in the making. Yep, it's taken us about a year to get this thing together, so I'm quite excited. It is 3:30 a.m. here in the East Coast time, and something like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning in Germany. So with no further ado, let's just dive directly into this. So for today, we have the amazing Helge Klein from a company called Sepago that's based in Cologne, Germany. So quite excited about this. And Helge's going to talk to us about the Citrix User Profile Management solution that Citrix acquired from Sepago over just about a year ago. So with no further ado, let's just dive directly into this. So real quick, Helge, thank you so much for being here today. And can you just briefly describe who you are and what do you do at Sepago?
Okay. Hi, Doug. Hi, everybody. Good. We finally managed to make this happen.
It has been a year, hasn't it?
At least. Yes. Okay. Well, I work as an IT architect at Sepago. And in that role, I have worked on Sepago Profile, a product you may or may not know about. Well, if you don't know about it, it doesn't matter because it doesn't exist anymore. We sold it to Citrix about, as you said, a year ago. And right now, the much enhanced version of Sepago Profile is available as Citrix User Profile Manager. And we're going to show you how it works today.
Very cool, very cool. So can you tell us real quick a little bit about, what happened, with the acquisition of your technology over to Citrix, what Citrix is doing with it? Have they added it to XenApp, Zen Desktop? Can you buy it? That sort of, explain to us where the product stands today before we dive into the actual demo. Sound good?
Yeah, great. Well, the good thing is, obviously, pricing is relevant to everybody. Here, the great thing every customer with at least an enterprise license of either XenApp or Zen Desktop already is licensed to use User Profile Manager. So you don't need to pay anything. You just go to My Citrix, you download this stuff, you try it out, and if you like it, well, just use it.
Very cool, very cool. So, okay, well, let's just dive into this. Sound good? So, what are you gonna show us? This is a solution without a admin tool. So, what are you gonna show us?
Well, yes, we haven't had our own GUI, and we still don't have one to keep things simple and easy to use and manage. So, indeed, it's not. We don't have any flashy stuff to show the world, but I have set up a very simple environment here consisting of one kind of infrastructure server which acts as a domain controller and file server. You see its screen right now. And then I have a traditional Windows 2003 based terminal server with presentation server 4.5 on it. The kind of stuff that's probably out there in most corporate networks. Well, and I'm going to show you how the product is installed, configured, and used, and all in a very quick walkthrough, I expect.
Wow, that's a pretty beefy load there. So let's have at it. I'm quite excited to see this myself.
Okay, so. Well, the first thing you have to consider before using any profile management solution is how to deploy it. And we've always considered deployment a very important task because if you want to be enterprise ready, you have to consider that machines are running 24/7. So you can't just expect admins to power down all their servers or install the product in a time where nobody's working on your farm, because many farms out there are being used all of the time. So when you install User Profile Manager, it initially just sits there and doesn't do anything. I'll show you this very quickly. I move over to my presentation server. You see here we have a system service. It's highlighted, and you see it started. But nevertheless, it doesn't do anything. So you can just deploy User Profile Manager on any server on your farm. It will be started, and unless you explicitly tell it to start working, to start processing user logons and logoffs, everything will work as before.
Well, very cool, very cool. So, in other words, as people are deploying XenApp 5.0, or the Feature Pack 1, what have you, to just go ahead and select to install the Citrix Profile Management and keep the service enabled. Is there an overhead associated with this?
Well, as long as it's not doing anything, there's obviously minimal overhead. There's only this service doing nothing. Even when it's working, the overhead is around 1%, which it adds to system load. So it's at the edge of what you can actually even measure.
Yeah, makes sense. Sounds good.
Now, let's consider I'm an admin trying to try out this profile management stuff. I've installed it on this presentation server already, so as not to bore you with that, not very interesting step. It's just an MSI you click through. Now, as I mentioned, initially it is disabled. You can see that here, Enable Profile Management is a setting which I explicitly disabled. You don't have to do that explicitly. It will be disabled without any configuration, but just to show that it is disabled, I set this setting to disabled. Now,
how did you get to this screen here? That's
magic. Well, not really. We provide, or rather, Citrix provides an ADM template which you just import into your group policy configuration. So I'll open up this very simple group policy I have here, which I use for configuring the user profile service. And there you see policies, makes it a little bit large, administrative templates. Now classic, you see user profile manager is already a classic. Now profile management. And there you have the settings for configuring the service. And as I said, I explicitly disabled it, but if you don't do anything, it will be disabled initially. Now let's enable profile management to see what it does. Okay, enabled, move over to my presentation server. There, run GP update. So Windows and the profile management service will know that settings have changed. Okay. Now let's verify this has worked. The User Profile Manager has a very extensive logging function and can be configured at various levels. I've enabled the most verbose level, and let's see what's happening here. Go to the bottom, and there we see we got a computer policy refresh event. So User Profile Manager knows that the group policy has changed and reread its configuration. So it should know that it's active right now, which you can see here. So everything is good. Now let's log on and see what happens. I'm using an RDP connection for simplicity's sake from the domain controller. So this should be my terminal server. Okay, I don't want to see this ever again. I have a test user, which I'm using for this. And this test user, he doesn't have a user profile manager profile yet. He has instead a roaming profile. which is probably the situation which you have, click this away, which you have in most environments. Users have their roaming profiles, and now, of course, it's interesting to see what happens if you move over and introduce User Profile Manager. Now, this is a very simple desktop, obviously, not very interesting to watch. Let's switch over again to the presentation server and see what happens there. I'll try to find the section where the logon processing started, and that's right here. And as you saw, the log can be very exhaustive, and it helps you troubleshoot stuff really greatly. So you can see every single file copy if you want to, and you see how long it takes, and AD queries, how long they take. So that can be really helpful.
Very cool. Very cool. Before we move forward, can you describe what's happening during the login process? So, in the sense of, what are you guys adding to this? You know what I mean? Are the files being stored on the server? Some solutions store them on the server, and you virtually sort of create a shortcut to it. Are you compressing it? What are you doing? How does this work?
Okay. Well, what's been happening right now is that User Profile Manager has processed the logon, and that means in this case, User Profile Manager detected that this user has a roaming profile, and that the user does not have a Citrix User Profile Manager yet. You can see that, for example, here, that was where I opened the log file, and if in this situation, if the user has a roaming profile and no UPM profile yet, User Profile Manager will migrate the profile. It will leave the roaming profile untouched, so you can always switch back, and it will create a new UPM profile where you configure that to be. It can be reside on any file server, on any share on your network, but by default, it'll be in the user's home directory. You see here, this is my test01 user's home directory. And in there, User Profile Manager, just a couple of minutes ago, has created this subdirectory. The name, by the way, I've configured myself. So the terminal server v1 English profile. And there we have various folders, all managed by UPM. You can see some of them have kind of crazy names, like with the endings as in _UPM_var, which means they're delocalized. We have, of course, many Windows languages out there, not only English, but German and hundreds more. So that's where User Profile Manager keeps its profiles.
Very cool.
Now, the cool thing is, I talked about deployment initially. Obviously, once you enable UPM, you don't want to process all your maybe thousands of users, but you want to start with a pilot. So how do you do that? It's actually quite simple. Let me try to find the right console. You can tell UPM to only process users from a specific user group. That's what I did right here. I configured it to process users from this group, UPM users, only. And my tester1 user is obviously a member of that group, or User Profile Manager wouldn't have done anything. Now, let's log off tester1. It's not so interesting watching this gray screen here. And let's log back on with a different user. Okay, same machine. This different user is very creatively called test02. And again, an NFR message. Now, what happened during this logon? Let's switch to the UPM machine and reopen the UPM log, and what you see here, UPM detects a user is logging on, does a few checks, and then says, okay, this user tester2 is not a member of my group UPM users, so I'm not going to do anything. That means if UPM doesn't do anything, what's happening is that Windows does what it would do without UPM installed. So you see here, tester1 has a local profile. That's what UPM uses under the hood. And tester2 has a traditional Windows roaming profile without UPM interfering at all. So this is a great and very simple way to conduct a pilot. Just install UPM on all machines you want to test it on. Define a user group, put 20, 50, or whatever number of users into it, and then you're good to go.
Very cool. So you can migrate a local profile and or a roaming profile over to the UPM not a format, but the UPM profile solution. What happens if you're doing the pilot and you say, you know what, I don't want to go this way for whatever reason, and you take them out of that group? Does it migrate that info back, or do they lose that info? How does that work?
Okay. Let's say for some reason I discovered in my pilot that this test1 user, he can't really work with UPM. There's some kind of problem. Maybe I've missed something. I've misconfigured something. In case I just take him out of the group, UPM will not process him, just like this tester2 guy, and let Windows handle the user. So the user will get his roaming profile back.
Oh, very cool. So, but will they lose any information that was stored in the UPM profile?
Okay, they won't really lose anything, but these two profiles are different.
Yes.
UPM can initially migrate an existing profile, either local or roaming, as you said, but once that is migrated, UPM will not touch the Windows profiles anymore.
Okay.
It will only use its own profile user store, what we call it, and store any changes the user makes in any session in that user store.
Very cool.
Obviously, if you migrate back, if you take the users out of this user group, they will get the roaming profile, which may be a couple of months or days or weeks, whatever, old.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, you can migrate local and roaming profiles. Can you do anything about profiles? Let's say they're stored in like the Flex profile, or one of the other solutions like AppSense or Res, or a solution like that.
Well, we have a very extensive customization capability, and that means User Profile Manager is designed to be very simple at the beginning, but powerful if you want that complexity or need it to configure applications that make trouble. So that means that you can include or exclude different parts of the profile that might contain stuff that temporary stuff. For example, you have an app data roaming that you don't want to roam between your machines. So this is a little difficult to demonstrate, actually, but what I'm going to show you is the default configuration. Let's move over again. Maybe lock this guy off in the meantime. So, I have this on the other machine after all. So let's go to the directory the Profile Manager is installed to Citrix User Profile Manager, and this is everything the package comes with. What you see here is it comes with an INI file, which is kind of a recommended initial configuration. And once, if you don't have group policy set up yet, User Profile Manager will read the settings from the INI file. Once you move everything over to group policies, the INI file can be safely deleted. But just let's have a look at what's configured here, what we recommend. For example, we have some parts of the registry. I'll highlight this line, for example, where we know that lots of data is stored that is not really needed. For example, this tray notify registry key, it contains actually all the icons Windows shows in this small space here in the system tray near the clock. And Explorer does what Microsoft recommends programmers not to do, and that is caching binary information in the registry. So this single registry key can grow to several megabytes in size, and we don't want to roam that between machines. So UPM can exclude basically anything in the registry you don't need. This is an example for that. And then another example from the file system. As I said earlier, User Profile Manager will synchronize everything by default unless you configure it differently. Now, what I don't want is local settings. That's not new information, as all listeners will know. The user profile consists of two large areas: local settings and roaming settings, which are named differently on various Windows versions. In a V1 profile, local settings just called local settings. In a V2 profile, it's just the roaming is called local settings is called local settings, and the roaming settings are called application data. Now, we don't want to include local settings because, as the name implies, stuff stored there is supposed to be local to the machine and not to roam with the user. But there are always exceptions to this rule. Programmers might not know about this distinction and store stuff that's supposed to roam with the user in local settings. And not only third-party independent software vendors, but even Microsoft programmers don't know about Microsoft's own rules. A very good example of this are the Office programmers. Let's highlight the corresponding rule. Office 2007 has a nice thing called Quick Access Toolbar, QAT, and you can customize those toolbars and put the commands and shortcuts you need most often into those toolbars. Now, what you expect as a user, once you do that, you expect those customizations to follow you. But by default, that won't be the case with roaming profiles, for example, because Office stores those settings in local settings. So what we do is we explicitly include that directory where Office stores these QAT files, so they'll roam with the user. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much for that deep dive there. That's so you guys can basically do anything you want with this.
That's correct. Yes, you can exclude one folder, like local settings, and include a subfolder of that folder, and you'll only get the contents of that subfolder. So there's pretty much you can do with this.
Very cool, very cool. So what else is there? What else would you like to show us?
Okay. I've a couple of more things I might mention. Well, for one, most profile management solutions, they only deal with the profile, well, hence the name. But there are applications that mostly don't work on terminal servers, but on fat clients like Zen Desktop, for example. And those badly written applications, they often use hard-coded paths. So we might have an application that stores some stuff in C:\app data, for example. Now, it would be kind of difficult to use this app on a terminal server because you would have multiple users all writing to the same directory. So the logical thing would be to install that app on a client OS, single user OS. And you might do that centrally in your data center with Zen Desktop, for example. But then you would need a mechanism to roam this data from outside the profile with the user. So User Profile Manager has this feature called extended synchronization, where you can tell it to sync any file on the local machine. So I could use this synchronization list here and put in, for example, something like bad app data, and don't forget this one, and User Profile Manager would roam that with the user. Of course, that doesn't make any sense on terminal servers or Zen app machines, but it might be really helpful for bad apps on Zen desktops or even on clients. I didn't mention that, but the license allows you to use User Profile Manager on your clients too.
Oh, really? I was going to ask you about that. So, can you please expand on that?
Well, essentially, the license, the EULA, allows you to use User Profile Manager on basically any machine that is connected to your corporate network. Well, I'm not a licensing expert, but as long as you're well licensed in the Zen app and or Zen desktop space, you are good to go. But if you want to have full details, obviously better clarify this with your Citrix representative, but there shouldn't be too many problems.
Now, when you have the UPM installed, I can install it on Windows Vista, Windows XP, so my local workstation, my terminal services boxes, Citrix boxes, and VDI, and have the same profile across all three of those types of platforms?
That's a very good question. Well, for one, you can also install it on Windows 7. It's not officially supported yet, but it'll work. But then, okay, answering your question, one profile for different platforms is a very tough thing. It's next to impossible, actually. And User Profile Manager doesn't work that way. The way the information from the profiles is stored is kind of similar to Windows, to the roaming profile approach, just the structure in the file system. So you should use one profile per platform, meaning one profile for your clients, one profile for your servers.
You just do machine-based GPOs, basically, in order to have that profile stick to that group of servers, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I can quickly switch over to my domain controller, and you'll see I have one GPO, which I've linked twice. It's this HKUPM profile, which does basic configuration of User Profile Manager, like enabling it, which I did. So let's refresh. Now it's showing the current value, and configures logging. You see I have there are various categories which I can selectively enable or disable, and I've enabled everything, so you can see how verbose it can be. But then there are differences between various platforms. You see I have one OU for my terminal servers here, and below that I have even more OUs. One is called V1 profiles here, and even German EE, and English. Those are different terminal servers based on Windows Server 2003 in various languages, German and English in my case. And there I configure different user stores. The user store, remember, is the file share where User Profile Manager stores its settings, and basically the user profile information. And here for the German 2003 terminal servers, I configured this folder. And let's, for example, switch over to a 2008 configuration. There I have a different directory. So yes, with User Profile Manager 2.0, which is out right now, you should separate your various profiles.
Well, this has been a very good demo, Helge. I've quite enjoyed this. Is there anything else that we've missed?
Well, I think that was the most interesting thing. Just one very quick thing at the end. You might wonder how we actually differ from, for example, roaming profiles. We have taken what's best from roaming profiles and used that, but of course there are many things that are not so good, and one of them is the way data is synchronized between the local machine and the profile store on the file server. And what we do there is we have a feature called Intelligent Synchronization, which sounds maybe a bit intelligence is always a difficult word when it comes to computers. But anyway, what we do is we monitor the changes on the local machine, and we know what's changing in the file system. So let's take an example. You have one folder sitting on your desktop, for example, and in that folder you have various big files, for example, big PowerPoint slides. And one day you decide, oh, this folder is called Presentations 08. Well, it's 09 by now, so let's rename it to Presentations 09. So what would Windows roaming profiles do? During log off, it would see, okay, on the network, there's a folder Presentations 08. Locally, there's a folder Presentations 09. Okay, those are different. So let's delete the folder Presentations 08 from the file server and do a full copy of the seemingly new Presentation Server 09 folder. Of course, with large files, that might take quite a long time. User Profile Manager, on the other hand, will know that the folder has only been renamed, and it will only perform one very quick and simple rename operation on the file server, renaming the directory Presentations 08 to 09, and you're done. So that's in a nutshell how our intelligent synchronization mechanism works.
Very cool. Very cool. Anything else that's different between what you guys do in Windows Profiles? And then at the same time, how do you compare and contrast against some of the other solutions like an AppSense or an RTO software or Res software solution?
Well, you mentioned various other solutions that are out there. Of course, there are many of them. And, well, one thing that comes to mind first is that many other solutions use a mandatory profile as a basis. User Profile Manager doesn't do that. We had a mandatory profile back in the old days with the sepagoPROFILE because we thought, probably like everybody else, if you have a mandatory profile as a basis and only store the deltas, the differences a user is changing in his session, then you'll have a very small mandatory profile and hopefully also a small set of deltas.
Okay.
Now, this proved to be wrong. Well, the mandatory profile typically is very small, but as users are working over the weeks and months, they change so much typically in their environment that the deltas grow and grow and grow until the deltas have nearly the same size as a full-grown profile. So the mandatory profile doesn't really matter. It'll get replaced by those huge delta files. And that doesn't really make sense. You don't save space effectively. That's one thing. And the second thing is, how do all these various profile solutions work during log-on? The same basically as what sepagoPROFILE did. Well, first, they let Windows load the mandatory profile. Once Windows has set up the mandatory profile and mounted the user's registry hive to create HK current user, they have to import all the user settings into that mandatory profile. That means, okay, copying every file and directory over, but also copying every registry value. And while the registry is really fast when it comes to reads, it's kind of slow when it comes to writes, especially if those writes are massive. And think back of the deltas I told you about. After some time, users accumulate all kinds of settings, and all those settings have to be imported one value at a time into the registry. And this also happens concurrently on terminal servers if multiple users are logging on one quickly after the other. And well, what we learned the hard way is that the registry really isn't designed for this kind of simultaneous massive write, and that'll take its time. So delays of 10, 20, even more seconds are not so uncommon. We observed that with sepagoPROFILE. I can only guess that it's similar with other solutions based on mandatory profiles. But that was the major reason we switched from this mandatory profile approach to a different one. If you think about Windows profiles, well, roaming sucks, but local, it's kind of cool, isn't it? Yeah. Everything is on the machine. Have you ever heard of guys having problems with the local profiles? Well, I haven't. So what we do is, during logon, even before Windows is looking for a profile, we put everything onto the local disk, kind of like on a silver plate, and then we let Windows do what it would do anyway. Windows looks, okay, this user, he's got a profile right there on this disk, so I don't really have to do anything. And that way, logons are kind of getting faster. I hope this makes sense.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and that's very good information. Thank you so much. This has been it's been a great episode. I'm quite enjoying this. Is there anything else you can share with us?
Sorry.
You're a wealth of knowledge, so I'll listen to you all day long, as you know. So
yeah, well, I mentioned the log file earlier, so I don't want people to bore people any longer than necessary. I just encourage everybody to try the solution out and have a good look at the log file. It can tell you so much about your environment. I'll just switch over quickly for one last time. So this is the User Profile Manager's log file. I just quickly show you what can be in there. Let's have some. Let's look for a real logon. Well, seems to be mostly policy-related stuff. We had a user logging on earlier, didn't we?
Yeah. See, it's so big, you're having trouble.
Maybe. Okay, let's try again. Look for the username. Okay. So there it does something. What you have in here, you have a very detailed, accurate time information up to the millisecond. you have a severity level, and hopefully you'll only see information and no errors or warnings. Then you have the name of your domain, the name of your user, the session ID, the thread ID, which is mostly interesting to us programmers, and then the actual log message. And as you can see, here, User Profile Manager copied a file from the user store from my server, which is called SRV1. So in this case, it copied actually the ntuser.dat, which contains the user's registry information, to the local disk, to the :something. And just using this as an example, you can see this took, nearly no time at all. But if you compare the timestamp of one line with the timestamp of the next line, you'll see exactly how long this particular information took. So you can see, you maybe have trouble with your network or with your file server, do specific operations take too long, longer than they should. For example, we have also AD information here, User Profile Manager looking up some AD information on this test 01 user. And you can see, well, in this my virtualized environment, all running on a single laptop, well, this is not too fast. It takes, nearly 750 milliseconds, which it should be slower. It should be faster than any real environment. So you can use this log file not only to troubleshoot User Profile Manager, but also to troubleshoot your environment. Is everything fast and working as expected?
Very cool. Very cool. Well, Helge, we better leave this. We better stop. So I've enjoyed it, but let's go ahead and call this a podcast. I thank you so much for your time today, for taking us through a really deep dive of the Citrix Profile Management solution. And so you had mentioned, you can download a trial. Where will somebody? How do they get that?
Okay, that should be easy enough. If you are a Citrix customer, you probably have a My Citrix account. So you just log on to My Citrix. I think the URL is My Citrix. What's it called actually? I don't remember. But if you have
www.mycitrix.com. That's how I get there.
Thanks for helping me out. So you log on to My Citrix, and then the hardest part is finding User Profile Manager. You just navigate to XenApp, and then you can see the components that come with XenApp, and User Profile Manager is listed on that page. You can also go to the Zen desktop page, but, there are various all ways lead to Rome, I think.
Absolutely. Well, perfect. Helge, thank you again for your time. This has been quite enjoyable, and I hope everyone out there has enjoyed it too. So thank you again, Helge.
And one last thing, maybe. You're very welcome, and it's been great fun doing this. If you want to need more information about User Profile Manager, go to the forum on the Citrix support forum, or you can visit my blog, where I occasionally write about User Profile Manager too. Just visit blogs.sepago.de. That's it.
Sounds good. And that is blogs.sepago, sepago.com. Did I spell that right?
That's right. At least you know how the address of my blog.
I know how to get there. It's a great blog, Helge. So that's blogs.sepago.de. And it's a great blog because you go, just like you did within this video, you go really deep into subjects, and it's quite easy to understand too. So many kudos to you. I love reading stuff whenever it comes in. I'm always like, ooh, sweet. So
Thanks a lot.
I mean it. So, well, let's go ahead and call this an episode. So, Helge, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you.